right. Well, I'm pleased to be joined by James Vagle, new Executive Director of Housing First Minnesota. And James, thanks for joining me today. It's good to see you.
Great to see you, Brian. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So James is a veteran of the housing industry in Minnesota, has been with Housing First Minnesota, formerly known as the Builders Association of the Twin Cities, since 2006. Most recently, James was Vice President of Advocacy at Housing First Minnesota, where he was the architect of the industry's emergence as the leading voice for housing in Minnesota. So just wondering if you could maybe start from the beginning, James, and talk about you've been involved with Housing First Minnesota / BATSI for quite some time now. I know in the past you've been at the Capitol and have done a lot of kind of behind the scenes advocacy work there. Now I assume you'll be taking a little more of a, I guess, public high profile position. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Yeah, I think so. It's a great opportunity. So yeah, the new role will be organizational leadership, and I'm thrilled for the chance to sort of take the work that we do at the Capitol and broaden that out and try to grow the conversation. Our advocacy work is always going to be a high priority, but we're trying to elevate the housing conversation and really the housing cause to a much broader audience. We think this is a competitiveness issue. It's a community issue. And my role and what I've been tasked with doing is to try to bring, and that conversation together and to elevate, home ownership as an issue that Minnesotans ought to think about and think about it as a community value and a competitiveness issue for our state going into the future. So, but your question about it's interesting. I was actually previously in the industry before BATSI in 2006. So I like to tell people it's been 2 short decades of time in the industry. And as I think back, I was on Governor Ventura's staff, and a colleague of mine got the job at the Builders Association of Minnesota. And so that was my on-ramp into the industry. And I just fell in love with it. And I've never found an opportunity that matches sort of the technical elements and sort of assembling all the different pieces of building and remodeling and developing. That's all very interesting to me. But then just the cause. Homeownership is wildly popular across every demographic segment, every political segment. People want to own homes in Minnesota. It's 90%. And so to be able to work in an industry and to lead an organization like ours with something that 90% of the people want, 90% of the people don't agree on virtually anything. But homeownership they agree on. So that's a really, really cool opportunity for us and our team to be able to work in the industry.
Yeah, and what was your role in the Ventura administration?
I was a policy assistant, so equivalent to a legislative assistant. It was first job out of college, administrative work, fascinating sightline into public affairs, and it was a really interesting time. I was there in late '99 through 2000, so his second year, sort of full year in office.
That must have been an interesting job with one of our more interesting governors.
It was, and if you remember, it was sort of a, there was a tripartisan arrangement with the Independence Party governor, a DFL-led Senate, and a GOP-led House. And so, yeah, that was my introduction to Minnesota politics. So I was very new, and I soaked it all up, and it was quite a time.
Right. And then, so tell us a little bit about your advocacy work at the Capitol for Housing First Minnesota. And I guess we can start with the most recent legislative session. What would you say are some of the things that you're tracking at the Capitol this year, and what did or didn't happen that you were, with regard to the home building industry?
Yeah. So, this session was a very interesting one. I would say what we tracked most closely and what we were most directly involved in was a comprehensive effort. It was titled the Housing Affordability Act, Legalize um, um, Affordable Housing Act, and it was Representative Elkins in the House and Senator Draheim in the Senate, and it was a collection of proposals that looked to modernize zoning and permitting and planning to try to, sort of introduce starter homes in that missing middle market that just doesn't exist in our housing market today in this region. So that got its, sort of most, prominent, hearing, and it moved all the way to the end of session, and at least portions of it did to the end of session on the Senate side. And I thought, that was a very, very important step for Minnesota to begin to think more, innovatively about how do we modernize zoning in our state. We have not done, and this was Representative Elkins' sort of, opening remark. We haven't modernized. The last time we did any substantial work on Minnesota zoning laws was 1994, which was my senior year in high school. So that's a long time ago now. And so it's time. What was, sort of the well-intentioned work in 1994, our argument is that has to be looked at and refreshed. Don't have to throw it all out, but we need to say what, in 2022, what is the housing market? How can we be responsive and balance all the interests that, the legislature is asked to balance? So that was a big one. It didn't happen, of course, like most things in the omnibus bills. They just, the whole global deal stalled at the end. So that, we were disappointed with that, but understand this was, sort of a much bigger issue than just housing. Interesting, Brian, the other piece that maybe flies under the radar is the coalition of interests that were involved. I go back long enough where, at many times, myself or others on our team, Peter Coyle or Nick Erickson, they were the only testifiers on a bill like this. And there were now 5, 10 different organizations, local, regional, national, that had weighed in. We had Zillow testifying. We had, Zonda. We had the George Mason University, who's got an incredible research arm in the Mercatus Institute. They helped, I think, fill out the debate. It's not just Housing First Minnesota, the trade group for the home building industry. It's Housing First Minnesota and a large coalition, the Minnesota Chamber, the Center for the American Experiment, others. The Builders Association of Minnesota were all at the table. And I think that is tremendous progress. Doesn't show up as a bill passed, but, in sort of the long road to, creating, impactful change, I thought that was a real high point. And then I think in general, I thought the legislature did a very admirable job of balancing affordability with some of the new ideas. So there's, some of the climate change, electric cars, energy code changes. Those are ideas that are absolutely worth considering, and we're at the table. Our contribution is one of the reasons we're in the kind of challenging spot we're in is that we've sort of said yes over 4 decades to sort of narrowly well-intentioned regulatory ideas. And the cumulative impacts of those is they really add up and they don't always work well with each other. What we've tried to do at Housing First Minnesota is add an affordability and sort of an efficiency and an integration to those ideas. And I thought we made a lot of progress, and that's bipartisan, by the way, Brian. Housing, our message is we do not see housing as a partisan issue. Like I said, it's popular across the entire spectrum, and every community is focused on housing. So that was a high point. I just think people were really, they were focused on housing in a new way.
Yeah, affordability is a huge issue, as we all know. Can you explain how that ties into the zoning issue that you talked about earlier?
Yeah, affordability is a major issue, and it's very much snowballed over the last 10 years. And I at the early part of my career, we still saw, townhome and starter homes, small lot, single family homes coming online, and we just don't see those anymore. Zoning is a piece of that. And when we think about, zoning broadly is reasonable. We want to sensibly plan communities. We want to make sure that we have, different land uses and predictability, for communities to manage their affairs. But zoning is also used, that authority is also used for aesthetic requirements. It's used to, drive projects into the planned unit development process. And inevitably, the planned unit development process erodes affordability. It becomes essentially a loophole negotiation. A sort of every development in a community, if it's in a PUD, is negotiated on itself, and that's a very tough way to manage a housing market. And that's what the experts have told the legislature and have told us is you're going to have some PUDs. It's essentially a variance. And we can kind of in our head say, if there were 25% PUDs, that would be about right. There's a topography issue. We all want to be sensitive, to protect resources. So a PUD is not in and of itself problematic. But when we have cities, and that's what, the Mercatus Institute studied, some of them are, over 50, some are 75%, some are 90% PUD. That means every housing development that comes through the door under the broad zoning authority is driving into this, sort of one-off negotiation. And that's where home size, lot size, garage size, aesthetics, design elements, tree ordinances, things that aren't, or tree requirements, things that aren't sort of in the standard ordinance, Brian, are included. And that's an affordability challenge. And, I guess I go back to what I said earlier. We were sort of on the front end of this, and certainly received a lot of, robust dialogue when we elevated this issue, 5 years ago or so. And now I think the breadth of folks that are, acknowledging this, including the Biden administration, it's one of their top priorities is to reform zoning. So I feel like, there's a bit more of a consensus out there that zoning and affordability have a challenging relationship.
Yeah, and I think in the Twin Cities now, the median or average home price is what, 350 to 400,000, kind of in that range, which is it's for an average working family. That's tough to,
It's very tough, Brian, and of course the new single family is even higher, and it's the highest in the Midwest. Katie can get you those numbers, offline. But yeah, I mean, we're very concerned about the erosion of affordability, and we're trying to invite a conversation to get everyone to the table and try to modernize and try to fix this.
Yeah. What can you say about the impact of rising interest rates, and do you see that as having a chilling effect on home building? Or I guess another way to look at it is people might want to get in before rates go even higher. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, interest rates are a big household consideration, right? So when we think about the housing market, broadly, when you boil it down to a family or a household making a decision, the interest rates matter. And as we look at this, as folks consider a home buying decision, I think what's coming now is a look at all the tools in the toolbox. And the good news is, banks, we just saw banks have passed their stress test. Our lending standards are strong. And so we're heading into, the Fed is taking these actions to cool inflation, which I think is a good thing. A byproduct of that is interest rates, of course, fluctuating. I think historically, if you're of a certain age, 5 3/4, feels somewhat historic. I think in the last decade, this is clearly a rise in rates. So I think some alternative mortgage products, I think working with lenders more closely to explore, how to make home ownership happen, because, the rise in interest rates is met with a historic underbuilding. We've underbuilt for 15 years. In our region, if we're not the lowest, we are among the lowest inventory in the country. So the demand is incredibly high for home ownership. Rents are quite high. And now with interest rates, it is a major consideration, but I think the focus for homeowners is going to be in, looking deeper in that toolbox than they've had to do over the last few years when rates were low.
Yeah, and of course, still very low inventory of new and existing homes out there. So combine that with demand, and there's I guess it's no surprise that prices are going up, right?
Well, and I think there's some, it's a good follow-up. There is, this could increase the urgency among lawmakers to look at that regulatory modernization, because we're so underbuilt, because the inventory, crunch is so intense, and interest rates have risen and have changed some of those dynamics. What better time than now to really take an urgent look at providing more flexibility and letting the market respond? And if that means a 2-car garage instead of a 3-car garage, we got to meet the market where it is. If that means a smaller functional space, single family homes like we used to build in cities like St. Louis Park and Golden Valley, that's what the conversation we're trying to have. We want to build safe, durable homes. They're going to be the most efficient, high performing homes in the market. They just might be a bit smaller. And we think that's a good thing. And that's the conversation we hope to have.
Sure. I think when I think of Housing First Minnesota, of course, I always think of Parade of Homes. What is your take on where Parade of Homes is heading, and any new wrinkles there, or what is participation looking like?
I'm thrilled to, be able to lead and build on that legacy. I mean, our Parade of Homes in this region is the strongest and largest in the country. So we're very proud of that legacy. Very popular, obviously, among, the residents of our state. We've introduced, I think, some fun, incentives to come out and tour. One is our 10K giveaway, which is something to help homeowners. It's an actual, a contest where we've had 4 winners in our spring tour, and the response to the chance to win some down payment assistance for first-time homebuyers was outstanding. So that was really fun. And, that happens because the Parade platform is over 70 years old. It is a respected and known institution. So we plan to use that platform to help educate and to help our industry members market their product. We are experts in connecting the home building industry to the homeowners of Minnesota, and that will continue.
Yeah, and just looking at your bio here, I know you're a graduate of the University of Minnesota and a big Golden Gopher fan of can you talk a little bit about your passion for the maroon and gold?
I mean, I'm a college football fanatic and a Gopher football fanatic. I'm a proud alum. My wife and I both graduated from the U, and we've been season ticket holders since we graduated. Travel to bowl games, and it's one of our favorite hobbies is Gopher football.
Yeah, and so you have strong roots in the community. I know it's in your bio that you grew up in northwestern Minnesota cities of Mahnomen and Moorhead, and now a Twin Cities resident. So Minnesotan through and through.
I am. I only lived away 4 years. I was in the Navy for 4 years. I was on the Theodore Roosevelt, which is an aircraft carrier, and so I lived in Virginia. Well, I lived on a ship for 4 years. But yeah, I'm a proud Minnesotan.
Well, great. Well, James, it's been good chatting with you. Anything else that you'd like to add before we let you go? It's there's certainly a lot of layers to the housing issue, and I think we've just barely scratched the surface. But
well, I just want to thank you, Brian, for the opportunity, and just look forward to convening and elevating a homeownership conversation in Minnesota. That's what we're focused on here in the near term, and we'll look forward to talking with you again soon.
Absolutely. Likewise. Have a great day, Jim.
Yep. You bet. Thank you.